this edition of the Comeback Conversations with Dr. Clarke. And by the way, I am Dr. Gregory Clarke Sr. And we're about to have a great time, a great conversation, great teaching, great fellowship. And as we continue to see the members of the Comeback Collective Circle starting to get themselves in, I know we have some things moving around because the day of this taping, we're in the early part of June. June has just started Juning. So that means to all the Geminis out there, including my wife, who in about less than 2 weeks is going to be celebrating her birthday. So this is Gemini season. It is going to, as always, Gemini season is just Gemini season. Sometimes you got to deal with the twins. And hopefully they'll have some more of that energy in their respective charts. You may be dealing with 4s or 8s. You never know. But once again, we appreciate you taking the time of joining us here. We appreciate you taking the opportunity of hopefully becoming a part of the Comeback Collective Circle. And on top of that, so many great ways. You can visit CoachClarkDmin.com today. If you haven't done so, you can take the 4th quarter assessment. And with that assessment, you get a little insight about yourself. And on top of that, we give you the invitation to join the email list because eventually we will start doing the newsletters and the communications. And we would love to have you a part of that. So, we can share certain information directly to you. And also become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Yes, at Dr. Gregory Clarke Master Coach, or if you type in Gregory Clarke D-Min Master Coach, on YouTube, you'll see my face pop up and smiling and, give you the opportunity to become a subscriber. Make sure you turn your notifications on. So when we do upload powerful conversations and teachings, you will be in the know. And we thank those already who have taken the possibility of being a part. Now, those festivities and those acknowledgments completed, quick monologue won't be in the comeback monologue long. Just simply, just continue to keep everyone in their respective spaces of just thinking about your community members. Think about those around you, regardless if it's people from a geopolitical standpoint, or even if you're locally in your respective countries. Just think about people, because we know that people are going through. We are acknowledging that, but we know that there's an empowerment, there's an ability, and if you're hanging out with the right people, you're going to get nourished, you're going to get some sustainability, and also it deals with the levels of consistency that you're willing to go through. So regardless of what certain circumstances may be happening, like here in the United States, we're just watching certain things is what it is due to this administration, but we're not going backwards. And as we continue to lay that as our foundation of recognizing that it's not so much pushback as I would say, but it's about the ability of understanding that we just recognize that we are empowered, we're a strong community, and as long as that we make sure we exercise the respective rights that are given to us as being citizens, especially in the United States, we can turn certain things around. It takes work, it takes mandated movements, and we have to be in those respective possibilities. So, as you can see, my monologue is not that long today. I know I'll get some hand claps and thumbs from our co-host. Let me see, did I make her a co-host today? I should have made her a co-host. I think I did. No, I did not. So let's see, she's laughing already. She already send me the emojis. That's good. That's a good thing. Sometimes that's good to keep people that keep you, abreast of certain things. That's not a bad thing. And if you're willing to work with it, then you start to understand it's not criticism. It's about having a critical eye, which we all should have, because if we have those critical eyes, especially in our respective communities, then we'll have less potholes. That means we'll probably get back to those spaces where the village took care of the children. And, because as I'm starting to see, as much as I was raised in the Bronx in the 70s and 80s, there was still a sense of community. We need to get back to that. Because if we don't get back to that, then regardless of how much we love technology, it can keep us fragmented. So make sure you check in on your respective community today. Okay? So without further ado, just like I said, we're not going to Labor long. Where did it go? There we go. Of course, I know Miss Johnson will let me know. Let me okay. Make sure we do this. Right, let's do this. Do. Give me a second. How are we doing with boxes? Are we good?
We are ready for takeoff.
Oh, look at God. Look at God. So, without further ado, as you can see, we're going to go over the next couple of weeks. If you missed some of the previous episodes on legacy planning, or if you missed some of the conversation around insurance, or as we started having those conversations about building the respective relationships, you can always go back and catch up to the Dynasty Path, because this is all part of the Dynasty Path of teachings. And for this arc is about recognizing our ontology or our ontological work. And as Ms. Johnson would say, before she asked me the question, when you say ontology, what are you talking? Ontology, what are you talking about? We're talking about your beingness. Because see, all of the things that we share in application, if we don't recognize who we are as individuals, those principles, those applications, and all those things that we can work through can manifest. But if your being is all screwed up, God forbid, then it's not that the principles didn't work. It's that you're just not working in alignment with it. You're just not in concert with it. And at times, being consistent in your actions is very beneficial. So the first conversation for this 3 arc series is starting tonight, and we're dealing with strategy cannot outperform identity. I'm gonna pause right there because that should just land right there. Strategy cannot outperform identity. Ms. Johnson, can you read that first paragraph for us, please?
I was still in the pause thinking about that. Uh, most leaders chase better tactics, vision boards, conferences, new frameworks, yet produce the same results. The real problem, they're running a new strategy on an old operating system.
Now, the reason why I'm starting off with that, because I think about the times when I come to my computer and it tells me either update is happening, or I can tell when there's an update coming. My computer starts to act a little sluggish, starts acting a little slow. Or even at times where, maybe Dr. Cheryl acts, say, my computer's acting up, and then I'll go on her computer and says, well, dear, you had a bunch of updates that we're attempting to either fully install or starting to download. And usually when that happens, depending upon how big the update is, yes, it can cause some collisions. It can cause some minor confusions. And the only reason why I say minor confusions because what's happening is you're attempting to work while starting to download or attempting to install. And next, the computer's probably looking back at you saying, I'm ready to finish installing, or I'll do the update at a particular hour, and you're in the midst of working, which is not a problem. But there's a small little conflict that's happening. And you'd be surprised that, especially in life, we have many opportunities to deal through conflicts. But the real and first conflict that we have to deal with is within ourselves. So if you're attempting to run a new strategy, or from a biblical space, about to pour new wine into old wineskins, you start to recognize that doesn't necessarily work, because the old skin may not be able to hold what's happening as a new strategy. Like what's happening right now in technology, I have a couple of I think I have about 4 or 5 of my older laptops that I still have around me. I know I can see about 2 or 3 of them within earshot, eyesight. And I recognize, as much as those laptops were great laptops during the time when I had them, or they were in my use, my functioning use, they would not be able to handle what's going on. Some of them are probably, were built for Windows 7. Some could have been built for Windows 10. But if I tried to install Windows 11 on some of those computers, and I remember that when it was time for the transition to 11, Windows 11 initially had a little check to say, okay, let's see if this particular device can handle Windows 11, because number one, the structure of Windows 11 was much heavier, much denser than Windows 10. So that means is the processor will be able to handle it? Do you have enough RAM? Do you have the appropriate graphics that will allow you to manifest? And when you hear this stuff about GPUs, and I know it may sound like we're talking out of sorts, but it all goes back into that relative space of recognizing that if you attempt to do a new strategy, or if you attempt to move in new possibilities, act in the way that you may have acted previously. Like this is 2026. If I was acting like this was 2006 now, that won't work. If I was even acting like this was 2016, that won't work. I have to figure out what I have to do strategy wise and figure out how it aligns, or make sure that my identity is aligned with that in 2026. So the hidden problem: changing actions without changing identity is like installing new software on corrupted hardware. And hopefully, as I just shared a couple of seconds ago, I gave you an insight into that. That's like me pulling out one of these older laptops, and we would attempt to make the laptop wrong. See, that could, and that's part of sometimes our hidden problem. I will go grab that older laptop that could be, say, 3, 4, 5 years old, and get mad at the laptop. This laptop won't allow Windows 11 to install. I'm like, wait a minute. This computer cannot handle Windows 11. Have you migrated? Have you updated? Have you upgraded yourself? Are you in the current? Or I'm going to be stuck in my space and stuck in my rightness and say, this laptop should work. No, it shouldn't. It's not that the laptop is, that technology is past. Just like someone had a ColecoVision or an Atari right now, even though they got simulators out there that have brought all of those retro games to some space that you can play them. But to go back to an Atari 26, I remember that from the late 70s going to the 80s. Yes, I'm dating myself. And that was back in the days when that was fun. You had Pong and, Frogger and all that other good stuff. And then when it upgraded to Atari 5200, ooh. But all of that now is considered dated technology. Now, if you still have some of those devices, they're now considered vintage, and they're probably worth something over the course of time. But still, if you used to try to utilize that now, there's no HDMI capacity in any of those things that I just said. So how would you connect it to this? You would have to go around looking for adapters and everything else. So sometimes we have to look at the hidden problems that we sometimes create for ourselves and recognize how impactful that it can hinder, which I'm about to go to the next thought about your core truth. How it can hinder your success. How it can hinder your possibilities. Are you focused on the wrong things? So the core truth: success is built on an invisible architecture of thought, and you cannot build a new future without changing it. See, the winds of change are happening around us right now. As much as that, we may not like certain things that we're going through, and you have to go through it. You can't run around it. You can't say, I'm going to dig my head in the sand and say, no, I'm not going to deal with it. No, you got to deal with it. I know from a personal standpoint, like myself and Dr. Cheryl, we were dealing with a refrigerator issue for like a little over 3 months, back and forth and back, and all kind of stuff. Even the other day when the refrigerator came, she even said I was being a little snippy and a little, because I was dealing with the people who brought it here, and just certain things that just wasn't right. And I had to recognize at a point, so maybe I may have projected myself at that particular moment. So my identity at that moment was out picturing something that it shouldn't have been out picturing. But it becomes a lesson, because then when you can get to allow yourself to learn from those measures and recognize that not everything is going to be moving in a particular way. And there are times that you have to do, as I said, architecture of thought. Sometimes you got to think the situation out. And sometimes you got to take that moment, get out of the emoting, and recognize, just take a second, because this can be solved. Your emotions can't solve it. But if you stay in your practicality and you stay in your possibility of recognizing, then you won't be attempting to install new software on corrupted hardware. Any thoughts before we continue on? And I saw Dr. Cheryl's in the building. She want to speak anything about my projection yesterday? The floor is open. Oh my gosh, she's not taking it.
I think you did a great job with connecting identity with that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Our foundational concept, ontology, the architecture beneath performance. See, ontology is our way of being. It is the study about, how we're moving, how we're acting, how we are articulating, how we're orchestrating. And when we start to recognize that at times, as when we get to the formula part, sometimes we move in a space where we're not utilizing the right formula for our success. Sometimes we're looking for the results without recognizing, okay, how do we get to results? And you don't have all the other architecture or all the other parts of the formula at play for you. And it's not that we're going to make the results wrong or the lack of results wrong, because the lack of results is just a culmination of how did we get here? So as I read this, ontology asks the questions most leaders never think to ask. Because if you're an entrepreneur, business leader, regardless you're in technology, regardless of your whatever field you're in, you can be doing hair. Your being is about how you are effectively cultivating the customers. Are you effectively working with your clients? How those people recognize, I desire to come back to you. I desire to be in those spaces where, I see the particular service that you're rendering. You know what? I like that. Or even when you look at the quality of the items that you may utilize, that's why they have certain foods that's labeled as junk food or comfort food. You start to recognize, like, wait a minute, is that your basic diet? Now, of course, we all have the right to have those times and enjoy it as a part of our being, to enjoy certain things. And, every so often, it's good to, cut loose, but don't go crazy with it. So who am I being? And what reality do I unconsciously believe is possible? See, that's the ontological space that's happening underneath us. That's the space that, regardless of the insurances that you may decide to utilize or the investments that you decide to utilize, because then your ontology is going to come up. All of a sudden, you could be invested in the markets, and all of a sudden, you go through a particular spurt that can seem a little frightening or challenges your identity. Next, you may jump out of something. And then recognize later, it's like, wait a minute, now what would have happened if I had really worked with my being properly? Because I can even go back to early parts of the comeback conversations when we had that one episode. You can check it out on YouTube. But I'll never forget that episode when we started breaking down, suppose I had to put $5,000. When you say 10,000, 20,000, we were just saying $5,000 in certain companies. And there was in certain investment vehicles, people would have been in the millions. Certain investment vehicles, people would have been in tens of millions. Certain investments, they could have been close to 100 million off of 5,000. And that's why we talk also here about the difference of moving from being just in the middle to your burgeoning opportunities and possibilities of being rich, then moving towards wealthy and affluent. Because even then, it's not about, we here at the Comeback Collective Circle are not about talking about being rich. It's not being rich. We're talking about wealthy and affluent. Those are the stages that we need to get to. And especially when we dealt with legacy planning, those wills and trusts are part of those aspects that move you towards those wealthier identity positions and those affluent identity positions. So every business is an expression of its founder's consciousness. I have to say that again. Every single business out here is an expression of its founder's consciousness. If it seems haphazard, if it seems like it's always looking for another trick or another something to throw up in the air, so it's like back in the days when the circus came to town. I remember that as a child. Circus always came to town, say February to like April, back in the days, and we'll be there for an extended period. And you can go there and you can see the lions and tigers and all kind of stuff. And it was there every year. They had to add something new. You couldn't go there. If you went there last year, they had to change something because in order for you to keep your viewpoint or your ability to be interested, they need another trick. And sometimes when you're moving from trick to trick to trick to trick to trick to trick, you have to recognize something. It's like, wait a minute. Is that sustainable? Because after a while, themes are not copywritten, but stuff that you can do in the marketplace can get you in a space where people recognize, oh, I know that brand. I trust that brand. I respect that brand. So we should all be in the mindset of recognizing that, whatever business that we're in, it's always an expression of the consciousness of whoever founds it. And then if they're wise, even if their consciousness is moving in a particular way, and that means they're building out their team to help source out those things that may not be as strong so they can be as powerfully expressed. Every result is preceded by a way of being. So even before, and this is where we're going to the formula. The formula starts with your being, who you are. Who do you think you are? How do you think? Do you jump at stuff? Are you moving in a kinetic space? Are you frazzled easily? Or do you think? Do you take the opportunity to be like, wait a minute, even something is ticking you off, like, wait a minute, okay. You have the right to be disturbed, angry, expressive, whatever, but you don't stay there. Because now you're in a space now, wait a minute, I need to think about this. Let me start pondering. Let me start processing. Let me start critically looking at the scenarios that are around me so that I can start to take some appropriate actions. Now, the actions are not results. The actions are just movements to say, some things are happening. Like Dr. Cheryl Clarke just informed me that some of my books came today, some more of my books. And, we're not going to talk about the situation, but, some more of my books arrived today. And that's great. It's an action. Now that the books are in hand, the books being here are just actions. That means the delivery people got the books here. That's still not a result. The result is, as people now, as we start going out in certain areas and having our conversations and talks and things that we consider to do while she has her great book, Girl You Cute, which is also available on Amazon. Now we have books on hand that, people looking for it, and I can start the autograph. And I have to shout out, Mr. Sampson, because the other day he sent me the picture. He got his copy, and I already told him, he has to, keep his copy with him, because as soon as I see him, I'm gonna make sure I sign his book. Same way I got to sign Nicole's. So that's a result, because now you recognize the fact, wait a minute, I desire to honor the people who are supporting us, even if it's just by ordering a book. Because the book isn't, well, we're not going to get into that because we're here to talk about ontology. But you start to recognize that this formula, especially from a business standpoint, has to be something that we have to recognize that applies to our business of living. Living is a business. Your life is a business. And sometimes we play ourselves small, or we think, oh, no, I'm just living. No. What are the decisions that you're making to see that are you existing or are you living? Because you may be alive. We're all alive, but you're doing one or two things. You're either existing or living. So most people change actions. Elite performers transform being. That means sometimes you got to change your ways. You got to change your consistency. You got to change your habits. I know Dr. Shaw always gets on me all the time to talk about my weight loss. I had to move into a space to start to transform my being. Because if I'm not willing to transform my being or to do certain things that were different than I used to do in moving like 2016 or moving like this was 2006, maybe I would not be here. Because then I was in a space then that I was refusing to move in a more transformed manner. And we all have those great opportunities every single day to do so. Any thoughts before we move on to the next slide? Anything that's coming up for anyone, especially maybe the formula? What anything that's popping up for anyone? The floor is open.
I'll
Oh,
share.
go ahead.
Specifically about the formula, I can remember times where I skipped step one, went to two, three, and four. I was like, wait a minute, it's kind of working, but it doesn't feel right, and then it falls apart. But with joining different communities and learning and studying, I'm realizing, oh, there is a step one. Because you can get really good. I'm excellent at step two, but then it starts to break down at three and four. And I'm like, oh, so you have to backtrack to one to get the result that you're actually looking for. And I'm complete.
Thank you for that. Dr. Clarke, any thoughts on this slide?
Well, yeah, if I have to say that when you look at the formula being, thinking, action, and results, in order for you to be, I think in knowing your foundation and then actually thinking, when you look at yourself and you had your who I am being in the space, sometimes you have to look at who you are, and sometimes we're not aware of who we're being. And others around you can actually say, listen, I think who you're being is someone that's a leader in the community that can actually be able to move forward in this. Now, the other part is you may have the ability to be a great speaker, a great thinker, but are you a business person? Are you able to have that thing to you can have charisma, but somebody with charisma may not be the greatest strategist. So, in order for you to be able to execute anything, you're being something and thinking it, and the actions, those are those arrows in between, is the gaps in between that you got to fill. And you cannot get there by yourself. Just being something, thinking something, and those little arrows that you got, I think are a very important part of the strategic part of this and getting to the result. Because a lot of times with me, I wanted to get to the result. And I got to give kudos to you and even Nicole to how to slow me down in regards to being in something, thinking it out before we even take any actions. Because when you know that, I think those arrows are the people that you have to gather along the way to bring you aware to who you are, what you're thinking, to bring actions to have plausible, plausible results that can sustain during the long term. And I'm complete.
Excellent. 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 Anyone else before we move on? It was an excellent thought. I like that. Those arrows are the people, because yes, none of us are islands. We have to recognize that. And I love the fact of what Dr. Cheryl and Nicole brought to bear. When you think about that in life, even for to have a platform or to have an ability, and even shout out, Mr. Sampson with his legacy chat channel, should go become a subscriber over there as well. When you start to recognize it's about having those relevant conversations, and those conversations, like how we're having a conversation right now, I can't have a conversation with myself. Now I can talk to myself. We can all talk to ourselves, and sometimes you may get some answers back. And that could be, another thought pattern as well. But you start to understand really when you're having a conversation or a communication, you're bouncing something off of someone else. And sometimes, as we've learned in the past, it's not about just hearing. Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to mold yourself or allow yourself to move in that space of some level of transformation? Because your consciousness, as we've learned, could always lean towards the negative initially. And it takes consistent work daily to say, you know what? I'm going to know who I am as a being. I'm going to think out my actions before I move into the space to start to create some movements, which are the actions. And then by those actions, now I can start to choose to look at what type of results that I get in the end of the day. With that, we'll move on to the next slide. Now, I had to bring this in because as I started to do my thought pattern and my research, I desired to stay in the Greek, which is very simple. And it's about just to give you a little grounding and foundation, because part of that is your spirituality is a part of your development as a business person, as a leader. Everyone has some sort of tenet that we all ascribe to. And my thing about Romans 12:2 is such a simple and powerful verse. You know, it's not we're going into some sort of Bible study, but it's just to reinforce the fact about ontological space and what it means to be in our space of being. And that simply means a blueprint for reinvention. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, that's where our being begins. Every single day when we have the ability to still be here in the land of the living, what are we doing that we are being transformed by? Because whatever happened, like how today, on the day of this taping is June 2nd, whatever happened June 1st, happened on June 1st. But if I'm still dragging June 1st into June 2nd, if it was certain things that weren't beneficial, if there was certain feelings or interactions or, whatever the case may be, then I'm screwing up my June 2nd. And too many times, and I'll be the first one, I throw my hand up into the sky and say, yes, I've done that plenty of times in the past. Because that's part of our human conditioning. Sometimes we can pull something like, well, oh, okay, let me pause for a second. I don't need to bring that here. Yeah, it happened. Yeah, we can acknowledge it. Yeah, I'm not going to forget it so we don't experience that again. But at the same time, do I really need to drag that into today? Do I need to just take that moment to be and like, wait a minute, okay, let me think about this for a second. Nah, it's not worth dragging it. Just move on. Let's move on. So conformed or schematizo is the external conditioning, scarcity narratives, reactive thinking imposed by the world around you. See, we build the world around us. When we think that we're being conformed, you start shaping the fact of, we see what food prices are, we see what gas prices are, we see what this price is. I remember reading something the other day saying that ever since COVID, used car prices have been up roughly 50% in value.